A single envelope on the kitchen counter, propped against the French press she used every morning. His name written in Hangul. Neat. Final. Junseo's hands were steady as he opened it. But his hands were steady for the wrong reasons. He didn't believe this was real. The letter inside was brief.
준서. 이혼 신청을 했습니다. 찾으려 하지 마세요. 이것은 요청이 아닙니다. 서연.
He read it 3 times. Hi guys, please like and subscribe to encourage me to put out more contents like this for y'all. Chapter 1. The King Who Believed He Was Untouchable. The penthouse overlooking the Han River was silent when Kong Junesio entered at 4:37 a.m. He moved through the foyer with practiced quiet, his Tom Ford loafers barely whispering against imported Italian marble. The city sprawled below him, 38 floors of vertical separation from the ordinary world, a kingdom he'd built with blood, calculation, and ruthless ambition. The scent hit him before he reached the bedroom. Green tea. Ilang ilang. That quiet, understated perfume Seo Yun had worn since their wedding day. For one uncomfortable moment, something shifted beneath his ribs. Not guilt. Junesio had systematically trained that weakness out of himself years ago, but irritation. The reminder that his wife still occupied this space, still anchored him to obligations he'd increasingly grown to resent. At 39, Kong Junesio was the undisputed head of the Bexa syndicate. His organization controlled shipping routes from Busan to Vladivostok, arms distribution across 3 countries, and offshore accounts that could destabilize smaller economies. He'd clawed his way up from the streets of Itaewon, surviving gang wars that had killed better men, emerging as the kind of leader people feared to even think about betraying. His marriage to Han Seo-yun had never been about love. It had been a merger, a ceasefire, a political calculation. 5 years ago, her father's organization, the Jinhee faction, had been hemorrhaging power after a failed expansion into Japanese territory. The war between Bexa and Jinhee had been brutal, costly, and ultimately pointless. The marriage had ended it. Enemies forced into proximity. A contract signed in front of witnesses who understood that this union was business, not romance. And yet, at some point during those 5 years, something had shifted. Seo-yun had stopped being merely an obligation and had become inconvenient. She was there. Always there. Quiet, composed, asking nothing, which somehow made her presence heavier. She never raised her voice. Never questioned his absences. Never commented on the lipstick traces or the perfume that wasn't hers clinging to his collar when he came home at dawn. Junesio had mistaken her silence for submission. For acceptance. For proof that he could have everything, the power, the respect, the beautiful wife at home, and Min Ji-woo, his mistress, waiting in a luxury apartment in Gangnam. He loosened his tie as he walked toward the master bedroom, already anticipating the familiar scene, Seo-yun asleep or pretending to be, the lights off, her breathing steady and controlled even when he knew she was awake. The door was open. The bed was untouched. Perfectly made. Hospital corners. The white duvet smoothed flat. Cold. Junesio frowned, his hand still on the doorframe. The room felt different. Empty in a way that went beyond physical absence. He crossed to the walk-in closet and pulled the doors open. Half of it was empty. Her section, the minimal, carefully curated collection she'd maintained, was gone. No dresses. No shoes. The understated jewelry she favored had vanished from its velvet trays. A slow, unfamiliar sensation crawled up his spine. Disbelief. He moved through the penthouse with controlled urgency now, checking rooms with the systematic precision he used when securing a location. The study, her books gone from the shelf. The bathroom, her toiletries cleared from the counter. Even the small bonsai tree she'd tended daily had been removed from the window ledge. No note on the bed. No dramatic scene. Just absence. Then he saw it. A single envelope on the kitchen counter, propped against the French press she used every morning. His name written in Hangul. Neat. Final.
강준서.
Junesio's hands were steady as he opened it. He'd negotiated hostage situations, stared down rival bosses, signed execution orders without flinching. But his hands were steady for the wrong reasons. He didn't believe this was real. The letter inside was brief.
준서. 이혼 신청을 했습니다. 찾으려 하지 마세요. 이것은 요청이 아닙니다. 서연.
He read it 3 times. No accusations. No explanations. No anger. Just a statement of fact and a boundary drawn in permanent ink. I have filed for divorce. Do not try to find me. This is not a request. His phone was already in his hand before conscious thought caught up. Her number. Straight to voicemail. Again. And again. The automated message in Korean, impersonal, and generic. He tried texting. Read receipts had been turned off. For the first time since he'd taken control of Expecte at 32, Kang Jun-seo felt something he had no strategy for, no contingency plan against. Loss of control. Chapter TWO. The night that shattered the illusion. What Jun-seo didn't know, what he had been too arrogant, too careless, too convinced of his own untouchability to notice, was that Han Seo-yeon had stopped being his wife 6 months ago. It had happened on a Tuesday. She remembered the date. November 14th. The night she'd returned early from a diplomatic gala hosted by the Seoul Metropolitan Council, one of those carefully orchestrated events where organized crime and legitimate business blurred into expensive champagne and false smiles. The gala had ended abruptly when a council member's scandal broke publicly, and Seo-yeon had welcomed the excuse to leave. She'd been tired of performing. Tired of being the elegant, silent accessory on Jun-seo's arm. She'd driven herself home in the Mercedes he'd given her for their second anniversary, another expensive thing meant to compensate for emotional absence. The penthouse had been dark when she entered. She'd removed her heels in the foyer, the cold marble shocking against her feet, already imagining a rare, ordinary night. Tea. A book. Maybe sleep that wasn't interrupted by Jun-seo's late arrival. Then she'd heard it. A woman's laughter. Low. Intimate. Comfortable. And Jun-seo's voice, warm in a way Seo-yeon hadn't heard directed at her in over a year. She'd stood frozen in the hallway, her hand hovering over the bedroom door handle, her heart doing something strange in her chest. Not breaking, not yet. But cracking. Fault lines spreading through foundations she'd convinced herself were stable. Part of her had known. Of course she'd known. The late nights. The distance. The way he looked through her instead of at her. But knowing and seeing were different things. She'd understood, in that crystalline moment, that opening this door would change everything. That there would be no pretending afterward. No comfortable denial. She opened it anyway. Jun-seo was in their bed, the one she'd chosen, the sheets she'd selected, with another woman. Young. Beautiful. Confident in a way that came from never having been broken by this world. Minute Ji-woo, though Seo-yeon didn't know her name yet. The woman wore the sheets like victory. For one brief, almost comical second, genuine shock crossed Jun-seo's face. Then the mask slammed back into place. Seo-yeon. His voice shifted into that controlled, reasonable tone he used during negotiations. This isn't what you think. Such a cliché. Such an insult. Seo-yeon said nothing. She simply looked at him. At the woman. At the scene that confirmed what her instincts had been screaming for months. Then she turned and walked away. No screaming. No tears. No dramatic confrontation. She walked to the guest room at the far end of the penthouse, the room reserved for visiting Expecte executives, and locked the door behind her. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap, and discovered something unexpected. She wasn't heartbroken. She was furious. Cold, clarifying, absolute fury. Behind the locked door, she listened to Jun-seo's approach. His knock. His voice cycling through emotions like a dealer shuffling cards. Apologetic. Seo-yeon, please. Let me explain. Frustrated. You're overreacting. Open the door. Demanding. Seo-yeon. This is my house. Open this door now. She said nothing. Around midnight, she heard him leave. The penthouse door closing. The private elevator descending. Undoubtedly going back to finish what she'd interrupted. That was the moment. Sitting in the dark, listening to the silence of an empty apartment, Han Seo-yeon stopped surviving her marriage. And started planning her escape. Chapter 3. The Art of Strategic Silence. The next morning, Jun-seo acted as if nothing had happened. Breakfast was laid out by their housekeeper, who came in early and left before Seo-yeon usually woke. Espresso. Rice. Grilled mackerel. Kimchi. the newspaper folded precisely beside his plate. When Seo-yun entered the dining room, he glanced up from the business section. "Good morning," he said calmly, as if he hadn't been in bed with another woman 8 hours earlier. As if she hadn't seen everything. Seo-yun poured herself tea with steady hands. "Good morning," she replied. Her voice was neutral. Pleasant, even. Junseo visibly relaxed. He'd interpreted her composure as acceptance. Forgiveness. The matter, in his mind, was closed. He kissed her cheek before leaving for a meeting in Busan. And Seo-yun let him. Over the following 6 months, she perfected the role she'd been trained for since childhood. The obedient daughter, the dutiful wife, the woman who knew when to speak and, more importantly, when to stay silent. She smiled at appropriate moments. Attended charity functions on his arm. Hosted dinners for Beeksa executives and their families. Played her part flawlessly. And quietly, systematically, she prepared. What Junseo didn't see. Late nights when he thought she was reading, Seo-yun was photographing financial documents from his home office. Account numbers. Transfer records. Names of offshore holdings. Not to use against him, she wanted nothing from his empire, but as insurance. Proof that she understood exactly how his world worked, should he ever try to trap her. What Junseo didn't notice. Small amounts of money transferred from the household account he'd given her access to. 500,000 won here. 1 million there. Amounts too small to trigger alerts, accumulating in a new account under her legal name, Han Seo-yun, not Kang Seo-yun. She'd never taken his name. Even the marriage certificate listed her as Han Seo-yun. A detail she was grateful for now. What Junseo didn't hear. Phone calls made from burner phones purchased with cash. Conversations with her mother's oldest friend, a woman who'd escaped to Jeju Island decades ago and understood what it meant to run from powerful men. Calls to a lawyer in Daegu, who specialized in discreet divorces for women married to dangerous men. Arrangements for a small apartment in Busan, not hidden, but far enough from Seoul that Junseo's casual influence wouldn't reach. And through it all, Junseo grew careless. He stopped hiding. He mentioned Ji-woo in passing. "I have a dinner meeting in Gangnam," testing boundaries that Seo-yun had already decided didn't exist anymore. He came home wearing her perfume. He stopped making excuses. In his mind, Seo-yun's silence meant consent. Acceptance. Proof that she understood her place in his life. Decorative, convenient, undemanding. He'd forgotten that Han Seo-yun was the daughter of Han Taijin, a man who'd built an empire through patience, strategy, and the understanding that silence wasn't weakness. It was often the sharpest weapon. Chapter 4. The Woman Who Walked Away. Seo-yun left at 2:11 a.m. on a Thursday. She'd waited until Junseo called to say he wouldn't be home, a courtesy he'd recently started extending, as if honesty about his absence somehow absolved the betrayal. She packed 2 suitcases. Practical clothes. Her grandmother's jade ring. Photographs from before the marriage. Books that had been hers before she became Mrs. Kang. She left behind the designer gowns he'd commissioned. The jewelry from Cartier and Tiffany. The luxury handbags worth more than most people's annual salary. The credit cards attached to his accounts. She wanted nothing she couldn't have earned herself. Nothing that tied her to his empire. The letter had taken 5 minutes to write. She'd rehearsed the words for weeks. Brief. Final. Giving him nothing to argue against. No emotion to manipulate. No thread to pull. She left it on the kitchen counter beside the French press, knowing he'd see it there during his inevitable 4 a.m. return. Then Han Seo-yun walked out of the penthouse that had been her prison for 5 years. She took the service elevator to avoid security cameras in the main lobby. She'd parked her car 2 blocks away 3 days earlier, another detail he'd never noticed missing. By the time Junseo found her letter, she was already on the KTX to Busan. The city she chose wasn't random. It was deliberate. Close enough to prove she wasn't running. Far enough that his casual influence, the kind he wielded in Seoul without thinking, wouldn't reach her easily. Busan was where her mother had been from. Where Seo-yun had spent childhood summers before her father's organization consumed everything. It felt like returning to herself. Chapter 5. The Hollow King. Junseo signed the divorce papers without contest. His lawyer had presented them 3 weeks after she'd left, formal and thorough, requesting nothing beyond the legal minimum division of assets. "She's not asking for much," his lawyer noted, clearly confused. "Given your resources, she could." "Give her what she wants," Junseo interrupted. He'd signed everything. The apartment in Busan she'd purchased. A financial settlement that was generous but not excessive. Complete separation. No contact clause at her request. His lawyer had looked at him strangely. This wasn't how powerful men typically handled defection. But Junseo understood, even if he couldn't articulate it, that fighting would be pointless. Seo-yun hadn't left him for another man. She'd left him for herself. There was nothing to negotiate. In the months that followed, Junseo expanded Beex's operations with aggressive precision. He absorbed a rival faction in Incheon, established new routes through Southeast Asia, made examples of men who'd thought his distraction meant weakness. His reputation grew darker, more dangerous. People whispered that Kang Junseo had lost something, though they didn't know what, and that loss had made him lethal. His empire flourished. His life hollowed. He saw Ji-woo twice after Seo-yun left. The first time, she'd opened the door to her Gangnam apartment with that practiced sultry smile, ready to console him, already imagining how this development would finally make her the official partner. "She left me," Junseo had said without preamble. Ji-woo's eyes had lit up. "I'm so sorry, baby. But maybe this is. I need to get her back." The words had hung in the air like a death sentence. Ji-woo had frozen. "What?" "I made a mistake. I need to find Seo-yun. Convince her." "You're not serious." Ji-woo's voice had cracked. "Marco, Junseo. We've been together over a year. You said you loved me." He'd looked at her then, really looked, and seen what he'd always known but never admitted. Ji-woo had been an escape. A rebellion against the weight of his marriage. A way to feel young and powerful and desired. But she'd never been the one he wanted to build anything with. That had always been Seo-yun. "I'm sorry," he'd said. "I was clear from the beginning. I never promised to leave my wife." "You didn't have to promise. You showed me. Every night you came here instead of going home. And now I'm telling you it's over." The second time he saw her was 6 months later, coincidentally, at a restaurant in Itaewon. She'd been with someone else, a finance executive, legitimate and respectable. She'd looked happy. He'd been glad. At least one of them had gotten a second chance. Chapter 6: Reconstruction. In Busan, Han Seo-yun rebuilt herself piece by piece. The first months had been hard. Not because she missed Junseo, she'd grieved that marriage long before she'd left it, but because she had to remember who she was before she'd become someone's wife. Before she'd learned to make herself small. She got a job at a small art gallery in Hornby, working under a curator who'd known her mother decades ago. The pay was modest. The work was meaningful. She started painting again. Not the careful, controlled watercolors she'd done as a teenager, but bold, angry abstracts that bled emotion onto canvas. Her first piece sold to a local collector. Her second was accepted into a group exhibition. By the end of the first year, she had enough work for a small solo show. She made friends, real ones, not strategic alliances or wives of Beexa executives performing friendship. She learned to enjoy her own company. Some mornings, she woke up and forgot she'd ever been married. Other mornings, the weight of those 5 years pressed down like atmospheric pressure before a storm. But gradually, the good mornings outnumbered the bad. She dated casually, a professor from Pusan National University, a bookstore owner, a chef who made her laugh. Nothing serious. She wasn't ready for serious. Maybe she never would be again. And that was okay. Chapter 7: The Encounter. 2 years and 4 months after Seo-yun walked out, Junseo came to Busan for a business meeting, a potential partnership with a shipping magnate whose operations could expand Beex's reach into Taiwan. The meeting finished early. His car wouldn't arrive for another hour. On impulse, something he rarely allowed himself, Junseo decided to walk. Busan in spring was beautiful in a way Seoul had stopped being for him. The ocean air carried salt and possibility. He found himself in Hornby, wandering through neighborhoods he didn't know, anonymous in a way he never was in Seoul. There was a small grocery shop on a corner, the kind that sold fresh produce and artisanal goods, utterly unlike the high-end services his staff arranged. He went in. The smell of fresh herbs and baking bread was unexpectedly comforting. He was examining ginger root, thinking about nothing in particular, when he heard it. A laugh. Clear. Genuine. Achingly familiar. He turned slowly, afraid he was imagining it. Afraid he wasn't. And there she was. Saoyan stood by the counter, talking to the shop owner with an ease and warmth he remembered from their early days, before his world had touched her, before she'd learned to hide. She wore jeans and a cream sweater. Her hair was longer now, loose around her shoulders. She looked younger somehow. Lighter. As if a weight she'd carried for years had finally been set down. She looked happy. The realization hit him like a physical blow. In 5 years of marriage, he couldn't remember ever seeing her look this unguardedly content. As if sensing his gaze, Saoyan turned. Their eyes met across the small shop. He watched her expression shift. Shock, recognition, weariness, and something else he couldn't read. Not anger. Not longing. Just acknowledgement. She said something to the shop owner and walked toward him, her steps measured. Junseo found himself unable to move, rooted by 2 years of regret and 1,000 things he'd never said. Junseo, she said when she reached him. Her voice was steady. What are you doing here? Business meeting. His voice came out rougher than intended. I didn't know you were. I didn't know this was your city. Of course you didn't. I made sure of that. She said it without malice. Just fact. How are you? She asked. The question was so normal, so civilized, that Junseo almost laughed. How was he? How could he answer that, standing 3 feet from the woman whose absence had carved a hole in his chest that nothing, not power, not money, not revenge, could fill? I've been better, he admitted. Something flickered in her eyes. Understanding, maybe. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? The words came out sharper than he'd intended. Sorry. I didn't mean. It's okay. Saoyan shifted her shopping basket from one hand to the other. Actually, yes. I am sorry. I don't wish you unhappiness, Junseo. I just couldn't be part of your life anymore. I know. Silence stretched between them. I was a fool, he said finally. I took you for granted. I thought you'd always be there, no matter what I did. And I destroyed the best thing in my life through arrogance and selfishness. Saoyan listened quietly. That's probably the most honest thing you've said to me in years. I've had time to think. To regret. He looked at her. Really looked. Cataloguing the changes. You look good, Saoyan. Happy. I'm happy, she said simply. It took time. But I found my way back to myself. I'm glad. He meant it, even though the words tasted like ash. You deserved better than what I gave you. Yes, I did. No venom. Just truth. But I also deserved better than what I gave myself. I stayed too long. Accepted less than I was worth. Silenced my own voice to keep the peace. That was on me too. Junseo wanted to protest, to tell her none of it was her fault. But he recognized the truth in her words. Saoyan had found accountability. For him, yes. But also for herself. It was a maturity that made him love her even more, even as it highlighted how impossible any future between them was. Is there someone else? He asked before he could stop himself. She smiled slightly. Does it matter? No. I have no right to know. But I care. There's no one serious, she said after a moment. I'm focusing on myself. Romance isn't a priority. And your art? I remember you used to paint. Her face lit up, genuinely, completely. I do again. Actually, I have a show next month at the gallery where I work. Nothing major, but it's mine. Pride swelled in his chest, bittersweet and painful. That's wonderful. Truly. They stood in awkward silence, the weight of their shared past pressing down. Around them, other shoppers moved through the store, unaware of the small tragedy playing out by the produce section. I should go, Saoyan said finally. I have things to do. Of course. She started to turn, then paused. Junseo. Yes? I forgive you. He stared at her. Not for your sake, she continued. For mine. I can't carry that anger anymore. It's too heavy. The absolution he'd secretly craved for 2 years should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like an ending. Final and irrevocable. Thank you, he whispered. Seo-yun nodded once. Then she walked away. Junseo watched her pay for her groceries, smile at the cashier, walk out into the Busan sunlight. Whole. Complete. Free. He stood in the grocery shop for several minutes after she'd gone, surrounded by the mundane details of ordinary life. This was Seo-yun's world now. Simple. Real. Hers. And he was a ghost from her past. A cautionary tale about loving the wrong person in the wrong way. Chapter 8. What Cannot Be Undone. Junseo returned to Seoul that evening. Back to his empire. Back to the penthouse that echoed with her absence. He would continue his work. Continue his life. Carrying the weight of his choices like he always had. But something had shifted in that brief encounter. Seeing Seo-yun happy, thriving without him, had crystallized a truth he'd been avoiding. Some mistakes couldn't be fixed. Some things, once broken, couldn't be repaired. And some prices were too high to ever fully pay. That night, alone in his study, Junseo poured himself whiskey and stood at the window overlooking the Han River. He thought about paths not taken. The man he might have been if he'd chosen differently. The life he might have had if he'd valued what he had instead of chasing what he didn't need. Seo-yun had gotten her happy ending. Or at least the beginning of one. She'd saved herself when he'd failed to. The greatest thing he could do for her now was exactly what he'd done that afternoon. Let her go. Wish her well. Carry his regrets in silence. Junseo raised his glass in a solitary toast. To the woman who'd walked away, to the life he'd squandered, to the man he'd failed to be. Then he drank deeply and turned back to his desk. To the work that never ended. To the kingdom of shadows where he'd chosen to reign. Kang Junseo had everything a man could want. Power. Wealth. Respect. Fear. But he would spend the rest of his life missing the one thing that had ever truly mattered. This was his penance. His punishment. His price. He would wear it like a crown of thorns, ruling his dark empire, while the woman who'd once loved him built a life full of light. In the end, they were both exactly where they needed to be. Seo-yun, moving forward into her future. Junseo, trapped in the consequences of his past. The story of their love had ended not with a bang, but with a chance meeting in a grocery shop and the quiet acknowledgement that some chapters, once closed, could never be reopened. END. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more dark romance stories. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Did Junseo deserve a second chance? I'll see you in the next one.